Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Philip, for inviting me. When I agreed to do this, I thought this was going to be a small presentation in your studio to your staff and a few guests. Yeah, come and present. And sure, I'll come and present. I've been largely humbled by all the amazing work done today. I've also taken to heart your request to unpack the multidisciplinary underpinnings of all of our practice, and in my case particularly of the submission that I made to the white papers. So I've done my best to unpack it and unpack my practice. And in response really to many of the presentations this morning that talked about job postings, I rejigged my presentation at the break. It's going to be part job interview and part performance. So I'm Michael Awad. I have an architectural practice based here in Toronto. I'm a wandering academic. I have worked with each of the 4 universities in the Toronto area at one point or another. These are my 9 buckets. This was more of a self-reflective exercise than anything else. Technology, urban environment, teaching, academia, architecture, cultural policy, photography, public art, and exhibitions. What I discovered by doing this is that I am largely a siloed person. But when I developed that chart of what was related to what, it confirmed that my practice is largely siloed, all except for 2 of those buckets. Photography and architecture, they're the only buckets that have a loop, that have a constant feedback loop between them. Everything else is related in particular ways to particular other things. What I submitted to the white papers was a photo essay, and I'm going to unpack the underpinnings of how I got there. My education, I have formal education in architecture, physics, mainly particle physics, computer science, industrial design, and urban design. My teachings, I have taught video production, robotics, computer science, photography, architecture, and urban planning. My architectural practice, I have various projects where I've acted in various capacities. The project I'm best known for is an experimental laneway house here in Toronto. 2 years in the planning approvals and an entire year to get a building permit. The project set urban design precedent, and it set technical precedent during its construction. Technology-wise, I'm quite comfortable with computers, but I do not have a website. I stay offline as much as possible. Currently, I'm working on this small cluster of 20 computers in order to improve my image processing capacity. It's modeled after a massive parallel computer system, but it's a very small one. So it's a mini massive parallel system. So what it'll do, it'll improve my image processing capacity by 20 times, and it will also be the basis of a urban simulation project that I'm starting shortly that will hopefully make art from urban simulation. I make my own camera equipment. There's the head-mounted piece was a real-time 6-view device. You can see the head mount there. You can see all 6 of those views. Those 6 views came into the helmet in real time, no electronics. The few that wore it, including myself, it made you disoriented and quite unbalanced. So the experiment came to a pretty abrupt end when it became dangerous. The idea behind that headset was that I took a position that the urban environment wasn't intense enough. And by looking in 6 different distances and directions, left, right, up, down, into the distance, up close, was collecting the urban experience and trying to make it more intense, sort of in your face. The other camera you could see there, the large format camera, was you can see the small DSLR in front of it. The large camera is quite ridiculous. I used it a few times. It was unwieldy. It had to come apart. It was very heavy, but it worked. It started to develop this long horizontal format on 70mm film. And this was all in furtherance of taking more information in about the city. The project that is the central project of my photographic practice is called the Entire City Project. It was presented in 2001. It continues to this day. The point of that project is to capture all of the places, all of the activity, and all of the people in the city. It's largely based in Toronto. It has similarities to Google Street View and Microsoft Street Side, but it's notable that it was presented for the first time 5 years before Google Street View was introduced. This is a map of downtown Toronto. The yellow line is Queen Street, one of our major streets, from the Humber River in the west end to the Don River in the east end. Represents about 14 kilometers of roadway. I started photographing it, and through custom cameras and custom software, I started taking more and more pictures. This was a transition period. For about 5 years, I was an architectural photographer, a professional architectural photographer. I had an excellent list of clients, all A-list clients, quite prominent firms. But it was about taking individual pictures of individual buildings, and I transitioned away from individual projects to taking pictures of the entire city. So this is 2 blocks of Queen Street West, and this is all of Queen Street West, about 14 kilometers of Queen Street West. It's one continuous image from the top right to the bottom left. You read it like a text, you go across and down, across and down. It is literally a text of a single image. These are a few fragments of some subway stations, Yonge Street, Bay Street. You see the actual stations themselves, and you see the beginning of the tunnels beside them. This is the entire subway network from east to west. Kipling to Kennedy, roughly 30 kilometers of subway, including an overpass that goes over the Don River there in the middle. Again, upper left to lower right. This is a rather confused individual in a supermarket. I think in the hardware aisle, the lighting aisle, but this is just one fragment of a supermarket experience. This is the entire supermarket. It became, the dizzying amount of visual information that we have to process just to get our groceries became a real issue for me. And what's more important is that we're able to do this whole thing and leave and not be psychologically damaged by it. In fact, once we leave, we forget almost everything there, but once we're inside, it has its internal logic and we're able to manage it without any real lasting damage. These images are presented multiple formats, but this is the smallest I can present any of these images. So this is the small version of the image. This is the medium size. This is the large size in case you want to place an order. And this Venice Architectural Biennale 2002 is the extra large size. The submission that I made to the white papers is a combination of 2 specific spaces. One of them being the Royal Ontario Museum during Philip's exhibition there with Van Hepburn, called Transforming Space. This is the upper floor of the ROM, the Royal Ontario Museum. It is it's a Libeskind space. You could see here, there is a bridge at the bottom, there is a bridge, and then there's the triangular space with the trapezoidal freestanding walls. Effectively, there are 2 of these spaces. One is sort of off screen, and the bridge in the middle becomes the linking point. It's like a barbell scheme. When you would enter the space, you have a choice of either going to the left to Van Helpen, to the right to Philip. Philip, I had presented in this room about 5 years earlier. I raised the white flag and I gave up, I totally surrendered to the room, whereas Philip's exhibition worked with the space in a much more intelligent and symbiotic way, I think. This is the root of the photograph that I took. I started at the bridge. I wandered around, and it was during the strike of the exhibition, so it has a workshop quality to it. Here we are at the bridge. Sorry if anyone has any vertigo. You can see that things are starting to be taken apart. It has a workshop feel. Those are two curators packing up artifacts. There are traveling crates. There's toolboxes. There's a hydraulic lift. And most of the pieces a lot of the pieces have been disassembled or packed up by then. The second space is the LASG studio. I'm sure a lot of you know it or will see it over the weekend if you visit it over the weekend. And this also was a portrait of a space. I mean, I treat these as portraits because these particular images are collaborations. I really feel like this is not just a photograph. This is a collaboration between myself, the space, and the people who created and uses it. That's Philip's office in the corner there. And what was striking to me was the similarity between the ROM space and the LASG lab space, insofar as they had, striking spatial similarities of what was there and how it was being used. Now, the difficulty was how to tie these two images together into a photo essay. What I ended up with, I fell back on my love of theoretical physics and particle physics, and I wrote, I think, 61 or 62 words. I'm embarrassed to say that it took me a month to do it, and I'm just going to read through, this is the performance portion of the presentation, I'm just going to read through the text that accompanies the image, the pair of images, and the reason I defaulted to physics was really in response and to honor the meeting between Van Helper and Beasley, who they first met at the CERN accelerator, which is that mecca of physics. So here's the with all the crop marks. In theoretical physics, proof of concept requires years of applied trial and error. It was 55 years after general relativity when the first black hole was discovered. It took 48 years to confirm the actual existence of the Higgs boson particle. Experimental architecture based on living systems. Will also require several generations of technologic advancement. To fully manifest as living architecture. Thank you.